So we said that in Roman architecture was important propaganda, but also together with mysticism. So from Vespasian to Trajan, so from the Flavian dynasty, the second dynasty of the empire, to Trajan, one of the so-called five good emperors in the second century CE, commemorative columns and triumphal arches became of common use and reached a great monumentality. So here you can see columns of Marcus Aurelius immediately on the left below, and then on top the column of Trajan in his forum, and then the column of Antoninus Pius in his tomb. So you have the list of all emperors, then I'll post for you the list too, to locate them better in time. So triumphal columns and arches were built to commemorate, for sure, great victories by Roman generals and usually emperors. The columns were so tall, we have seen Trajan column, that they were used as rallying points, as landmarks, so helping the people to navigate around the city. So a very famous triumphal arch is the one of Titus on the Via Sacra in the Roman Forum, which the Senate built after the emperor's death, so when he was deified, in memory of his conquest of the city of Jerusalem in 70 CE. So the Arch of Titus has provided the general model for many of the triumphal arches that started to be erected around Europe since the 16th century. And perhaps the most famous arch inspired to this is the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, built by Napoleon in 1806. So the arch was constructed in a special quality of marble, and has a single bay, and above it is an entablature, quite simple, and an attic. So an attic is this very high part where you can see the inscription. The inscription was on both sides, to be seen on both sides, but now is preserved only on the east side. So on each side is an engaged and fluted Corinthian column standing on a square pedestal. So the capitals of these columns are the earliest examples of the so-called, you remember, composite style. So, because it's a composition in between the Ionic and the Corinthian styles. So, having both the leaves, the acanthus leaves of the Corinthian, and the volutes of the Ionic. So, inside the arch, there are the famous reliefs of the victory of the emperor over the Jews. So the main inscription saying the Senate and the people of Rome dedicate this to the divinized emperor Titus was before ornamented with letters in silver or gold or some other metal. So the vault of the archway is coffered and a relief of the apotheosis of Titus at the center. So the deification of the emperor is symbolized like this, together with the symbol of emperorship, that's the eagle. Then there are panels on the sides in the internal part of the arch in which we can see the emperor on his triumphal chariot and the procession of the Jewish prisoners carrying symbols of their religion, for example, the seven-branch candelabrum. So the commemorative column, we have seen that emperors Trajan, Marcus Aurelius, Antoninus used this symbol and celebrative monument for their victories. So the commemorative column usually had at the top the statue of the emperor, but this was not an invention of the Romans, but the Romans went a step further with the column especially of Trajan and Marcus Aurelius, because there is no precedent to the idea of binding with a narrative frieze in a helicoidal band the whole column. So this concept was taken by the concept of books, which existed in those times. So books were not bound as they are now, but they were continuous scrolls of papyrus. So this is an imitation of the scroll open and spiraling on top of the column. So it's interesting then to note that the scroll is made higher as it moves up the column in order to counteract the effect of perspective. So in between the infrastructures, especially used by the Romans in their conquests and the control of the conquered provinces, they were building forts, especially along the fortifications, the walls on the boundaries of the empire. And these buildings enabled the Romans to dominate the people and the lands which they conquered. But then from the fort and military camps design that usually were temporary camps, we know that they then adopted the layout for their military colonies and cities. So in a temporary camp, usually the surveyors went ahead the column of soldier and they selected and lay out the site of the knight's camp. It was always constructed to the same pattern and surrounded by a ditch, a rampart, and a palisade. So the legionaries, so the soldiers, were carrying, together with all other things, 2 poles for the night camp palisade. So then inside were put leather tents, each of which slept 8 men, and these were carried by animals separately, by mules. So you see that was very well organized, so for a fast maneuverability and for easy reaching the center where the general was, and the exits and entrances. So developments in the architecture of fortification, so relating to these compact spaces, fast maneuverability and the discovery of perspective, led to the radial focus in city plans, so focusing the description on the eye of the viewer, and the development of ideal town plans. Do you remember talking about town planning? We already specified this. So elements of modern city plannings can be traced back to Roman concepts. They did great extensive city building activities, especially as they were consolidating their empire. So usually the colonial towns, so the new towns, were laid out in a variation of highly planned grids. So, and these were developments in the architecture of fortifications. Many European cities like London and Paris sprang from their Roman origins, and Florence too. As you can see from this aerial view of Florence, you can see the center designed in a very high plan layout. So the Western Roman Empire left to us a rich legacy of innovation and invention that is very evident today too. So they taught us about many principles of architecture. They gave us many examples. And they demonstrated to be prodigious builders and expert civil engineers. So they really thrived in advances in technology and in architecture that really remained unequaled for centuries. The Romans enjoyed many amenities for their day, including public toilets, underground sewage systems, fountains, and ornate public baths. None of this aquatic innovation would have been possible without the Roman aqueduct. So the first aqueduct was developed around 312 BCE, and this engineering marvels use gravity to transfer water along stone, lead, or concrete pipelines and into city centers. So they could span for miles, really, and cross deep valleys too, with arcade bridges. So with the aqueducts, Roman cities now had not to rely anymore on nearby water supplies, and to have water in their cities promoted public health and sanitation. So here you have a picture of the famous Pont de Garde in France, one of the most famous and well-preserved Roman aqueducts. And then here you have a picture of public toilets. So you see how they were using public toilets. They were sitting all together in this on these wooden benches. Then they had channels and basins with water to clean themselves. So the Romans didn't invent the aqueduct. We have primitive canals for irrigation or water transport earlier in Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, so in the east of the Mediterranean. But they used their mastery of civil engineering to perfect the process. So hundreds of aqueducts sprang up throughout the empire, some of which transported water as far as 60 miles. For example, the Pont du Gard that we have seen in the previous slide. So the most impressive thing of all is that Roman aqueducts were so well built that some are still in use today. The greatest example is the one of Rome's famous Trevi Fountain. So the Trevi Fountain is supplied by a restored version of the Aqua Virgo. Aqua means water and aqueduct, one of the ancient Rome's 11 aqueducts. And here you have the Trevi Fountain. So then, roads were important infrastructures. So Roman roads usually use 3 levels of substructures between the paving stones and a prescribed angle for the uplift of the center of the road. This allowed rainwater to drain off. Then they used numbered signposts every Roman mile, which indicated such things as the distance to the next town and which construction battalion, because were soldiers building roads, so which battalion, which corps had built the road. They also had extensive networks of underground lead pipes, so supplying clean water, so aqueducts were not only above the ground but under the ground too. And they were the first utilizing the concept of parks, public libraries, and plazas, so squares. So the empire was so vast, so at its height probably was nearly 1.7 million square miles. And to ensure an effective administration of this domain, the Romans built the most sophisticated system of roads that the ancient world had ever seen, and many of which are still in use today. At the end, the Romans built over 50,000 miles of road by 200 CE. And these roads were primarily built in the service of the military and military conquests. So the highways, because some of them were highways, allowed the legions, so the soldiers, to travel as far as 25 miles per day. And there was a complex network of post houses, meaning that messages and other intelligence services could be relayed with astonished speed. Okay, so next video will be the last on Roman tombs and cemeteries. Bye!